Hello, Wisdom and Wellness family. Welcome to another episode. Today, we are with a clinical psychologist, speaker, and podcaster, as well as the founder of Oasis Mental Health Mental Health Hub, Lwanele Khasu. We were having a whole conversation about how to say your surname, but you also don't know how to say your surname.
Yeah, no, I mean, I inherited it through marriage,
Okay.
so I've been corrected many times.
But you're still not getting it right.
Not really. I think it's a back of the throat thing where it's supposed to be kha. Was it sutu?
Oh, so it's
But-
like Khasu. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
but I'm Xhosa, so I kind of Xhosarize it, so I say Khasu.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and then
Well, I'm Zulu, so it's like Khasu. Like, it makes sense.
yeah,
Okay, let's get into some icebreakers
cool.
after a long day of work. And we just spoke about this, like a back-to-back clients. You call them clients?
Yes.
Yeah, back-to-back clients. People are telling you like the depths of their hearts. What's your favorite way of unwinding and leaving people's problems at work?
Sure. I think there's two things. Firstly, there's the 30 minutes in the car.
Okay.
When you just arrive at home and just like vegetate
Yeah.
and sit and you can't believe the day you've had.
Yeah.
But I think the other way is really just kind of like after the kids have gone to bed, just kind of sitting and doing nothing. Like
Okay.
just sit or read a book
Yeah.
or listen to some music, but literally just sit and do nothing for about 30 or 40 minutes or so. And then I feel like, oh, my thoughts are back in order. Because I feel like my mind goes crazy.
Do you know how to do it? Like to just sit, like without fidgeting on your phone?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Like you just said, you don't sit on the couch.
What's happening? I do, but like if I do that, I will grab a book. But I'm trying to, and that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
interested, like, can you actually do it?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be able to just be still and not like be still in a sense of saying, okay, it's time to be still. Like just sit on the couch, and that's what I'm doing. So it's either I will fidget on the remote, or I'll pick up a book, or I'll just be finding something to do. But you can actually just
Just sit and think, like, sure, that was so crazy and this happened in my mind and this happened. Oh, that person did this.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of processing. So you're actually doing something.
okay.
You're processing in your mind, but like actually my hand's doing anything or no.
Oh, so you're just like sitting there and letting you're almost watching what's happening in your brain. Observing is the word. Observing.
Yeah, observing my brain, going through the events of the day.
Yeah.
Kind of like, sure, like that person actually offended me. It's like, why did they offend me?
Yeah.
Like, what was that about? So it kind of like my mind
Okay.
rests. If I don't do that, I struggle to sleep.
So you do that every single day?
Yeah, like I have to give myself some time
yeah.
to just especially if I've seen a lot of people or clients
Yeah.
or things outside of the ordinary,
Yeah.
then I have to take some time to just process.
So what I do after podcast recording is I sit in a bath and I listen to Layla Hathaway. So it's like some jazz, but I have to have something playing. Otherwise I'll go mad trying to solve everyone's problem. And I have to sit in a bath and have candles on and listen to music. That's my way. Okay. If you could have the same meal every single night, what would it be? Don't
Oh
say
my word.
meat.
And it can't be meat.
Was it going to be meat? It's Xhosa, so there's a
I'm very
meat thing.
Xhosa. It probably would have been a steak and veggies.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But in the absence of that, I do actually enjoy umvubo, like uputu and amasi.
Oh, Mpoomy.
Yes.
Is it not Mpogok?
Umpogotko is the dry part of it,
Oh,
and
okay.
then the amasi is the wet part, which is like the sour cream.
Okay.
And then together it's called umvubo.
Oh, okay. For me, it's just Mpoomy and Nkomazi.
So I do actually enjoy that, but I don't know if I'd have it like every day.
No, my
I
tummy.
think the meat. I think the steak.
You could have steak every day,
Absolutely.
and your digestive system would still operate.
I mean, I don't know.
Okay. Last one. What's a misconception that people have about therapy?
I think an old one would have been we can read people's minds, which we can't.
Really?
Yeah, like people would be like, what am I thinking right now? Especially when we're in varsity. I was
Don't
like,
lie.
I promise you. It's like, oh, psychologists, you can read people's minds.
Yeah, it's like what's happening in my head.
What's happening in my head? But I think recently, it would probably be like we've got our lives figured out.
Yeah.
Like everything is great. We
Yeah.
are like these doctors who can doctor themselves.
Yeah.
which is, it's not true.
Yeah, because I think even like I don't know, now that you mention it, I think about it, like my posture is like, I'm coming to this person who has it figured out, who gets home and they know how to decompress. And
Oh,
I'm just here to learn because they've got all these systems in place in their lives.
yeah, no, that's not true. Like, I mean, there is a sense of knowing what is useful,
Yeah.
but don't we all know that? Like,
We do.
you know what food to eat, but you just don't eat it.
Yeah.
You know what
Chicken
things to
licken.
do to be healthy, or you just don't do it. So sometimes you know the things to be done, you
Yeah.
just don't practice
Don't do it.
Yeah.
I want to start by I think you've got quite a complex or an interesting journey of how you got into the healing space.
Yeah.
I know you lost your parents at a very young age, at 11 years old. So do you think, I want you to tell me about that from that moment, and how it shaped the space that you got into?
Sure. Ooh, what a layered. Do we have 2 hours for this
We've
podcast?
got
So yeah, so when I was 11, I lost both of my parents,
Yeah.
right? And I think at the time, I, I hadn't lost anyone major in my life. You
Yeah.
know, I'd lost a distant grandfather or things like that. But also,
Yeah.
you're quite young, you don't really know it. Like, your parents shielded you. And I think the thing about that loss for me was that my family was also quite close knit in terms of they were somewhat separate. My father was like one of those very strict parents, so
Yeah.
quite separated from like extended family much. Like, we knew them, we had them, but we weren't close.
Yeah.
So losing both of your parents and you're young, of course, it's extended family that's going to come into your space. And of course, they came in and they will take care of your needs, right?
Yeah.
Like your physical needs and all of that. But I remember, I think a year after they had passed, and I had this feeling, man, like, oh, I'm back. But I was like, back from what?
Yeah,
Like,
what do
I
you
was here,
mean?
like I never went anywhere. And
Yeah.
I asked my sister, like, was I on holiday? And she thought I was losing my mind at this point. It's like, what do you mean? You were not on holiday, you were here. But I think what was happening in my mind is that I was going through a lot of emotions and I couldn't understand them. I couldn't figure out what those emotions were.
Yeah.
So then I went on this thing. I was like, so if everyone loses people, like, is this what they feel?
Sure.
Are these the emotions that you can't understand, you can't package? And I was like, wait, there has to be something that needs to be done. So this
Yeah.
is my mentality all the time.
Sure.
Like, there has to be something that needs to be
Like,
done.
I'm the one who's going to
You know,
solve
like,
this. Yeah.
I don't take no for an answer. I'm like, there must be a way. Like,
Sure.
anyway. So then I'm like, no, man, there must be something that can be done. And I kind of went through a journey of trying to find out who are these people. So I grew up in Lusigisigi.
Yeah.
It's a small town. Your career is doctor, teacher, nurse type of thing.
Yeah.
So I went on this journey trying to figure it out, and then I bumped into HIV counseling. I was like, similar, but not really. And then I kind of let it go. And
this is you at 11, 12.
This is me at 11, 12.
Sure.
So right now, I think I was 12 because
Yeah.
I was in grade 9. I kind of went to school early. So I was in grade 9. We needed to choose some subjects, and I didn't know, like, am I going physics, commercial, whatever. So I went to a cousin's, we were visiting cousins, and she used to go to a school in Margate. And then Yanga says to me, oh, what are you going to do? And I say to her, I'm going to do counseling. I'm going to be a counselor. She's like, why not psychology? I was like, psycho who?
What is that?
What is that? Right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I loved the fact that it was such this nice exotic name.
Yeah, like not everyone can pronounce it. You're special. Yeah.
It's special.
Yeah.
Psychology is hard to write.
Yeah.
But also it kind of spoke to what I wanted. So I kind of held on to that. I'm
Yeah.
going to be a psychologist. I'm going to help people understand their emotions.
Sure.
I'm going to help people understand those dreadful, painful bits of themselves
Yeah.
that they actually don't understand. And I think throughout my journey,
Yeah.
that's what I've had in my mind. I want to help people understand that. Of course, in varsity, I took a detour because I was like, I have too much trauma for this. I'm not becoming a psychologist. But then I came back.
You came back,
and I
yeah.
stayed
You
way
always
back.
do.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you started the process of grieving your parents? Because I don't know, and you can correct me, I don't know if you actually know how to grieve at 11, 12, or understand what it even means to lose a parent.
Yeah.
So do you remember a moment when you realized, oh wow, I'm doing the work, I'm processing, or has it not come yet?
I think you can grieve early if
Yeah.
you have people to help you grieve.
Yeah.
And I think because grew up in rural Eastern Cape, nobody's really thinking about how are you feeling. They say,
Yeah.
are you okay? Do you have
Yeah.
food? Do you have a roof?
Are you going to
Are
school?
you
Are you
going to
clean?
school? Are you clean? Like all the basic needs, but they're not thinking mentally how are you doing.
Sure.
So I was the saddest girl in like high school was like a sad life for me. And I don't even think I knew that I was sad. I just knew that I was surviving.
Sure.
But when I got to varsity and I started doing the psychology thing, which is why I decided I'm not going to do this.
That's like, howdy.
I was like, not a chance. When I got to varsity and we're learning about these diagnoses and these things, and I was diagnosing myself left, right, and center, I was like, I can't do this. And at that time, I had never even been to a counselor or a therapist myself.
Sure.
So that's when I started doing the grieving process.
Sure.
Only in varsity, I think second year.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing that, I was like, never days am I actually going to do this as a career and listen to people's problems. And then I kind of just segued into industrial psychology, which is about
Work.
business and change
Yeah.
and all of that.
But what happens to a person or a child when you sit with grief for over 10 years? So that's my first question. My second question is, how do you help a child grieve?
Yeah. So I think with your second question, how do you help them grieve?
Yeah.
With whatever is coming up for them. Because grief means a lot of things, and just like loss, it means a lot of things at that particular time of the person.
Yeah.
So for example, for me, it meant my sense of identity. I had to move home. I had to adjust to a new life. So it wasn't even the grief of my parents that I
Sure.
needed. It was a grief of my life.
The change, yeah.
It was the change. It was really the understanding of, okay, so what do I do now? Do I actually have a future now? So who
Sure.
pays for my things now?
Sure.
So all the conversations that never get had, like, so that was the grieving process I think I needed.
So you just needed someone to say, okay, this is what's going to happen now.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be fine, or this is where you're going to need to make some changes, or
Yeah.
Okay.
I needed some level of help me understand what's happening.
what's happening.
Because my life has been turned upside down, and I
no
don't
one's
know.
telling you anything.
No one's kind of like breaking it down to say this is emotionally this is what's happening. Everyone is caring,
Yeah.
but it's like basic stuff, like it's
Sure.
like basic needs. Are you okay?
Yeah.
But emotionally, you're going through a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
And I think that's the turmoil you help children with. You
Got
help
you.
understand the emotions. What are you feeling? What's coming for you? And all of that. And grief sits for a long time. I say
Yeah.
this all the time. Like, grief is like that monkey in the corner that sits there. Sometimes it's in the corner, it's silent. You can see it like, oh, you're here.
Yeah.
But it's not taking over anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are the monkey in the corner. And grief is filling up the space and you feel it every single day.
Sure.
Right? Or you feel it in that moment, or something happens and it triggers it.
that.
So you never really get over grief.
Yeah.
And even in therapy, I don't even try let people get over grief. I try help you understand your grief
Yeah.
and be okay in this season of your life, because that grief is going to be there
But
all
now,
the time.
doesn't that feel, and I know we just dived right in, but doesn't that feel overwhelming to feel like, so this is how, and I know it's not how you're always going to feel, but I can imagine in the moment, it's like, so this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. Like, you don't get a break from feeling from that monkey, like you put it.
Yeah, you do get better. You do get better because you become stronger. It's like training, like
Yeah.
when you're at the gym.
Yeah.
It's not like the weight stops being 20 kgs.
Okay.
You just learn to lift a little bit heavier all the time.
Okay.
So as your mind stretches, as your brain stretches, as your regulation system stretches, you learn how to deal with emotions. Things get a little bit better, but it doesn't mean that you forget about the person. It doesn't mean their birthday doesn't trigger you. It doesn't mean their favorite song, when it comes on, it doesn't remind you of a moment and you break down.
Yeah.
Because we want to get over it.
Yeah.
And
That's
the
the
thing.
one, and you can't.
We can't.
over
You
it.
can't get
Yeah.
over it.
Yeah.
You have to understand sometimes it's going to creep up and sometimes it's going to be there.
Sure.
And you deal with it in the moment.
For someone who has never heard the word mental health or thinks mental health is being in an institution, what's a simple and plain way of defining what mental health is, plainly put?
Sure. That's a difficult one to say plainly.
We're breaking these things down so that people don't run away.
I know, but I think it's the way that you're feeling.
Okay.
I think that would be the most reductionist way to say mental health is the way that you feel.
Mhm.
And then in that way that you feel, you can feel absolutely like you're thriving and excited, because mental health is in a spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? And on the one side of it, you're healthy, you're thriving, and then on the other side, you're struggling.
Yeah.
And you might be in a institution, you might have depression, but it's how are you, what's your state of mind? How are
What's
you
your
feeling?
state of mind? I like that.
Yeah. What is your state of mind? How are you feeling? How are you coping with things around you?
Yeah.
Because that affects everything.
I love how you put it. What's your state of mind? How are you coping with the things around you? And the reason why I wanted you to put it that way is because I think when we think mental health, we think it's for certain people, but all of us have mental health the same way we've got physical health, we've got spiritual health. It's a component of who we are. But I think the way in which it's been introduced to us is like, oh, they struggle with anxiety. I'm just, but we all have to navigate mental health. Like you say, it's how am I dealing with the things around me? So now tell me, when it comes to our mental health, how does it affect our overall well-being?
It's the way that you think, right? Because it's the way that you think about yourself. So if, for example, you think I am small, I'm less than, I don't deserve anything. So that's your state of mind. That means you show up in that way.
Sure.
So when you're at work, you show up as insecure. And what happens with that? Like, oh, I'm not good enough to be here. What do? You then end up overcompensating. Where do you go? You end up in a burnt out space.
Sure.
So if
okay, ma'am, I need you to stop. This is feeling a little personal. So, and when you touched on burnout, because a lot of us are feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
Do you think, and specifically a lot of women are struggling with burnout, do you think we're burning out because we feel like we need to overcompensate? Because inside there's somewhere behind, even though we're doing the work, there's still that little thing sitting there that says, you're not enough.
Yeah.
You have to prove you're enough.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot, not always, but a lot of people struggle because you want to overcompensate.
Sure.
It's that wanting to do enough, but you haven't defined what enough looks like.
Okay, this is going to be a hectic day. This is going to be a hectic conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you don't define what your enough looks like,
Yeah.
you're going to try catch Mpoommy's enough.
Wow.
And you'll be like seeing like Mpoomy is doing a lot of stuff, or you're seeing other people doing a lot of stuff, and you think that's what your definition of enough is.
Sure.
But you don't know when Mpoomy started.
Sure.
So you can't be racing with Mpoomy,
Yeah.
because you actually don't know if Mpoomy started at 0 or minus 10 or positive 5.
Yeah.
Right? So when you are in a workspace, when you're showing up, anywhere you're showing up, you have to say, but where am I starting from?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And from there, you're saying, okay, but what do I feel about, like, what's my understanding of myself? Because if you're going in feeling a little bit insecure, you're going to try compensate. You're going to try be enough. You're going to try do what you believe other people are doing.
Yeah.
And you're going to burn yourself out in the process, because you think, I need to prove my worth here.
Sure.
And the only way to do that is to keep doing more.
So now how, if that is your, and I don't think we don't choose to be insecure. I mean, it's because life happens, the things people have said to us, our childhood. So when you find yourself, you identify now that, oh, okay, this is why I've been showing up this way. What are some tools? What is the first way to stop showing up that way, to realize that you're enough? Because it's easier said. Like, I can stand in the mirror and say I'm enough and chant it 5 times, but if I don't believe it, I don't believe it. So how do I start believing? How do I train my mind to believe that I am enough so that I can show up well?
I think firstly you have to define your enough, because if you don't know what that looks like, then you're still kind of floating around.
Okay.
But I also think one of the things that is so important is to understand yourself. Because if you don't understand yourself, you're going to really struggle with saying, where am I going and how do I need to get to where I'm going?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because now you're then trying to take other people's templates of directions, and that's not even your direction. Like, where are you going? Like, you're supposed to go south.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Why are you
north?
going west?
Right? Where are you going?
Yeah.
So a sense of understanding, so that insecurity comes from thinking your path or your direction is actually not good enough. So you think it's nicer to have a podcast than to just have a YouTube channel.
Oh, ma'am.
And then you think, oh no, but I must have a podcast for my YouTube channel to work.
Sure.
But you don't need to. If your path is a YouTube channel, focus
Follow
on
the
that
path. Yeah.
and focus on it and be good at that.
Yeah.
Understand where are you missing things? What do you need to work on?
Yeah.
Because if you try do things because other people's templates have worked out that way, you've
Sure.
missed yourself.
And you're digging in deeper into that insecurity hole.
Absolutely.
Personally, how do you define your enoughness? I don't know if that's personal, but how did you define your enoughness, considering that I don't think you had a lot of emotional support? Like you said, your needs were taken care of, but you didn't have that primary care of your mother and your father, which are the people who affirm us and make us believe we're enough. So for you, how did you get to that point of I am enough?
Listen, this is a work in progress.
Okay.
Constantly. I
Okay.
think in the different areas, wherever we grow, we find challenges like, oh, can I do this? And then that imposter syndrome kind of sits in. But I think for me, one of the things that have been really helpful is therapy. But when I then ended up saying, okay, but what do I want?
Yes.
That helped me. And then also like my faith, like I will not trade my faith for anything, because what happens is that I feel like God helps us define ourselves in ways that we've never.
Yeah. We don't have the vocabulary.
We don't have a vocabulary for it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but if he thinks I'm this person,
Yeah.
surely I'm missing something in me.
Yeah.
And then I start investigating, and you start seeing, feedback around you like, oh no, like you're really good at this and you're really good at that. I'm like, really? Okay, let me go into this investigation. But I think if you're not willing to understand the insecurity first, you're going to struggle to then take in the positive affirmations.
Sure.
Because you're not looking for a person to affirm that thing that you're insecure about.
Okay.
But if you are like, okay, I'm vulnerable with myself. I know I'm bad at this. I'm terrible at this. So I need to find ways in which I can understand what is it going to be, what's going to define my enough. And in this space, how am I actually going to find people that can affirm or take in the information? Because sometimes people do affirm you.
Yeah, but you're not receptive.
You don't receive it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh no, this thing.
Yeah.
No. And you just kind of like sweep away all of the people's affirmations and people seeing you, because that's what we want to be. We want to be seen.
We want to be seen.
But that's what I've had to do. Therapy, I've had to do a lot of investigations, but I still work on it. Like I run a business and I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, okay, what do I need?
Yeah.
And then I have to,
you
you
mentioned something that just really sat well, and Thibaut mentioned it as well in a different context, that you can't go forward without like knowing where you come from.
Yeah.
And he meant it in a physical sense, because I was asking him about where he grew up and why he feels the need to constantly mention that. And I think what you just said is that unless you understand where the insecurity comes from, then we can't yet define the enoughness. So we need to be vulnerable. What you're saying is we need to be vulnerable enough to sit down and say, okay, I have a problem with unforgiveness or envy. This is where it sits. And then from that place, can we start defining enoughness? Now, my next question based on that is, based on scripture, Paul speaks about this thorn, right? And he doesn't tell us what this thorn is. And this thorn could be a lot of things. And I think it's a great metaphor for life. What if your thorn is maybe your insecurity or your jealousy, and it almost feels like it never goes away, or it pops up in everything? How do you continue to navigate a positive, thriving life while this thing, it pops up every now and then? Because I don't know if you can just do away with it. Like I said, it's a work in progress. It means there's something there that keeps bothering you. So how do you continue to manage to thrive and be better while this thing just keeps popping up, whatever this thing is?
Yeah. Well, I think once you've kind of know what the thing is, because sometimes you just like step and you're like feeling pain, but you don't know where the pain is coming from. So once you kind of know where that pain is coming from, what's the thing that it is for you, I think it's always important then to kind of say, to kind of track. I like using evidence as a way to look forward. So in order for you, if you're a runner, and you in order for you to feel comfortable with doing a 10K, you need to have seen yourself do a 5. But when you've done a 5 and you're like, I do a 5 in like an hour, and then I do a 5 in 45 minutes, and then it becomes 30 minutes, and I can see the improvement. It's in the tracking of my progress that I'm audacious enough to say I'm going to do a 10 next week. So unless you're tracking your progress of whatever thorn that is, you're not going to be audacious enough to step to
Mm.
keep on stepping on it, because you're gonna be afraid of it.
Yeah.
You're gonna be like, oh, this thing, I can't,
I can't.
you know, I've got to stutter. I'm Moses. I've got to stutter. I can't
Yeah.
speak. Why
Yeah.
am I supposed to convince these people to follow me if I can't speak? But yet he did.
He did.
Because he had to lean in
Yeah.
into the insecurity,
Sure.
understand it, and then still say, okay, but what is still within me with the insecurity
Yeah.
that will still assist me to bring these people out of this place?
And I guess that's where the therapy also comes in, because
Absolutely.
that gives you the space to bounce and
Absolutely.
process things. So I don't know if it's because we are taking more stock or more account, but the rise of diagnosis of anxiety and depression it's ridiculous, right? And there's various factors that we won't go into. But do you think it relates to the way our community or lack of is set up? And growing up, I could, at my daughter's age, who's turning 6, I could run out the gates and my parents would send me to the shops and I'd meet my friends and we'd play and then I'd come home. Now, I can't even imagine my kids going outside of the gate. We have buzzers at our gates. Friends make appointments, and before you just stand across the wall and you talk to your friend. So the way in which community is set up is now on screen versus in person. Do you think this has a play or a big part in why we are struggling so much with depression and anxiety and all other forms of mental illness?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, well, firstly, I think even back then there was a lot of struggle. They just
Yeah,
didn't
they
know how
didn't
to
say it.
contextualize it and
Yeah.
how to label it. But I do think it's much worse now.
Yeah.
Because we are so aware of people's lives. Like,
Yeah.
we are so aware of what happens in people's house.
everyone's yeah.
Like, so much that it's like, how do you know that?
Are we supposed to know that?
Are we supposed to know that? And the thing about it is, when you grew up, if you're thinking about it, there wasn't a, I know what happens in your house. I know what happens in another person's house. I know, like, you weren't aware of that.
Yeah.
Even when you're poor, people aren't bothered by being poor.
Yeah.
They're only bothered by being poor when they compare themselves to the person that's rich.
Sure.
So and I see this a lot, right?
Yeah.
Even in conversations, like, people say, I didn't know I was poor until I went to high school.
Yes, that's always the conversation.
Like, I didn't know, because the thing is, when you look at yourself, you're comparing yourself with your environment.
Yeah.
And this is normal.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we eat.
Yeah.
This is what we know.
Yeah.
But now we know what is here, and then we know what's there, and we know what's on the other side.
Yeah.
And therefore, it makes us have this deep-seated desire to have and to have and to have.
Oof.
And even when we have, we don't celebrate what we've acquired.
Sure.
So now depression is around grieving the past. Anxiety is about worry about the future.
Depression is grieving the past. So you
Yeah.
can't move on from the past.
You can't move on from something that's happened.
That's
Yeah.
depression. Anxiety is you're worrying about the future, what
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
Okay.
This
Continue.
uncertainty.
Yeah.
So that in itself kind of sits in, okay, I didn't have, even my childhood was, or even like, do you understand? So there's a lot of grieving now
Yeah.
about things that happened in the past that
Yeah.
you are now observing. Yes, for some people, they've gone through stuff.
Yeah.
Some people have experienced traumas,
Yeah.
and therefore that will lead to the processing of that information, and that's hard, and that
Yeah.
overwhelms you, and you get depressed. But sometimes our depression comes from a place of, but you didn't do this for me, mom, or you didn't do this for me, dad,
Sure.
or did you see what other parents are doing for these people? So this level of comparison that we have in this day and age it's excessive.
Sure.
It's excessive, and it's causing a lot of insecurity, but it's
Yeah.
also causing a lot of just comparing ourselves and just feeling like, honestly, like,
Not
you haven't
enough.
done anything for me. You know, when
Yeah.
like thinking about your parents, like, do you do anything for me in actual fact?
Like-
like, what did you do? Like, you didn't do this and you didn't do this. And it's not because they're not supportive sometimes.
It's just the comparison.
It's just a lot of the comparison, and they don't have the capacity to give you what you're seeing from other people.
So what's the solution? I mean, we work on social media, and I need now constant breaks from social media, because it's too much. And you were saying that we know too much about people. I was thinking the other day, is like, is it normal to have to remember so many people's birthdays? Right? It's a small example, but growing up, you say happy birthday to the people around you that you see and whose numbers you have.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure every day you have to post someone to say happy birthday because you know everyone, but you really, really don't. And that is
Yeah.
constant, and it seems light, but it's constant stimulation. For me, it causes
Mm-hmm.
me anxiety that, oh gosh, who did I forget now? Did I celebrate this one? Did I post this one?
Yeah.
And I don't know if we would be living like that if we didn't have this world that we benefit from also.
Listen, it's a hard thing. I think it has to come with a boundary.
Mm.
We have to exercise some boundaries.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how much of social media you can take until it becomes toxic for you,
Yeah.
never mind other people.
For
Leave people
you.
for you.
Yeah.
And I do this thing where I'm like, listen, if I am starting to get feelings
Yeah.
from yours, I don't care if it's positive.
Yeah.
Even if you're just posting your life, if it makes me and triggers me in a way that makes me feel like my life is not good enough, I'm unfollowing you.
Yeah.
Like, I am removing you from my space.
So what happens if you unfollow me now and I come like, ma'am, you unfollowed me. Did I make you angry?
No, but I mean, I think if it's people that are close to you, you'd
Yeah.
have the conversation. If
Yeah.
it's something you want to have a conversation about. But I think we need to get into this culture of protecting our peace.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Protect your own peace. And
Yeah.
you need to understand what disturbs your peace. If you can see that you are particularly struggling around the workspace and everyone that posts around promotions and all of that stuff, not that you are jealous of them, not that you envy their lives, you just know it's triggering something in you that you actually don't like.
Yeah.
It's okay to unfollow.
I want to lean into that. Is there a difference? What's the difference between, like you said, we in a workspace and everyone around me is getting promoted, and it's not that I want the promotion. Like maybe I'm comfortable with where I am. I have my family life, and they get promoted. What's the difference between feeling jealous, feeling envy, and it's just triggering something in you that you don't understand? Because it's like, I think jealousy is you want something that they have, but you don't want it. But for some reason, when I see it happening for you, something in me is triggered.
So jealousy is wanting something that someone has.
Yeah.
The original, psychological meaning of envy is wanting something someone has and knowing you can't have it, so you have to ruin it for them.
Ooh. So jealousy is normal, is okay feeling, right?
So jealousy is I want what you have, but it also creates, it festers, right?
If you don't handle it.
If you don't handle it, it festers.
Yes.
Whereas envy says, I know I can have it.
Yeah.
But I want to ruin it for you.
Sure.
Like a person who's like, oh, hey, this podcast of yours that, doesn't even do,
okay.
like, when a person's like, they want what you have, they know they can't have it.
Yeah.
And therefore they want to ruin it for you. Or like, oh, hey, this jacket, like, where did you even get it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's so
that
odd.
great.
Yeah. So that's kind of like an envious thing because it's like this, it's where witchcraft comes from.
Yeah.
Because
plainly put.
literally.
Yeah.
Because it's literally the sense of, I just don't want you to have it. I don't want you to enjoy it.
Okay.
Because now it's just too much.
Okay.
But a trigger is a thing that makes you feel like, and we all have this feeling, right?
Yes.
Of, oh, but why don't I have your hair?
Like, why doesn't it work out for me?
Why does it not work? That time I don't even like wearing wigs or weaves or whatever. I'm like, but why do you have this nice hair?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, but okay, fine. It's whatever.
And then you move on.
It's nice on you. Thank you. Like, do you get what I mean? It's like a trigger of, oh, that looks nice.
Yeah.
But it's not like I wanted. But if it starts festering, then
So I'd put it, if I had to put it, I think in pictures and levels, on boxes and stuff. So if I had to put it in levels, it starts with that trigger. So the trigger is still, if we had to label it, it's normal. It's okay to have those triggers. It happens to everyone.
Yeah.
Then the next level is jealousy, where it's like, oh, I want that, but it's still kind of controlled. You can still pull yourself out, right? But then envy is where we don't want to get to.
No, we don't want to get to a space of envy where you're being ugly.
Where you're being ugly.
You're being ugly to people. You want what they have. You want to ruin what they have. And you just don't have a heart to celebrate other people. Like, yours will come at some point.
Yeah.
If God wants it for you.
Yeah.
Also, we have to accept that. But you don't want to be in a space where you just kind of like take things away
from other people.
The joy away from other people.
How do you learn to celebrate other people if that's not a culture you've grown up with, if that's not something you know, but now you've identified you have an issue? How do you learn to celebrate other people?
I think if you have a desire for it, that's a good start.
Yeah.
You know, when you have a desire to celebrate other people, it says, I'm not used to it, but I want to do it. And I think the best way, especially if it's a friend, like, listen, I don't know how to celebrate you, but like, I want to. What can we do?
It's the vulnerability of
Yeah.
saying, I don't know how to. Teach
Absolutely.
me how.
That's how relationships grow.
Yeah.
It's in that vulnerability, because if we're being honest, we don't know how to friendship with everyone.
We don't.
We don't. So if you say to a friend, listen, you going through something right now, I don't know how to be there for you.
That saved me.
You know?
Yeah.
But I'd like to be. So please tell me how.
How, yeah.
So even if they don't know how to be, like, what they need, at least they know that your presence is enough, and that you've got the heart to want to do something.
Yeah.
And when that thing comes and it gets triggered in their mind, then they'll say, okay, for me, now this is what you can help me with. Because they know your heart wants to.
Yeah.
You just don't know
how to. I think we're all just looking for spaces of truth and vulnerability, because I think when you're vulnerable and you say you can't do something, there's no way I can shame you for it. There's no way I can blame you for it. There's no way I can be angry, because you've been honest and you've been vulnerable, and there's space for both of us to grow and saying, okay, I get that, or okay, I don't get that, what to. What is emotional safety?
Oh, it's a wonderful thing we need to all learn to have with ourselves and with other people. But essentially what it is feeling safe and secure to exist with another person. So it's either called emotional safety or psychological safety.
Okay.
To exist with the other person, so that you're able to tell them when they offend you, tell them when you love them, tell them when you miss them. You know this thing where, like, we miss people, you're like, where have you been all day? Instead of saying, I actually missed you.
It's like, why didn't you call me?
You're like, why didn't you call me the whole day? Like, you come with this defensiveness of, I don't want to be too vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's this vulnerable space where you feel safe and secure to actually express those emotions.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we need it with other people, but we need it for ourselves, because we need to create that safe space for ourselves too.
Yeah.
Like, what are the conversations you're having with yourself in your mind?
Yeah.
What are the things you're saying about yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror?
Sure.
When things don't work out and you do fail, what's the feedback you give to yourself? Because if you don't create that emotional safety even with yourself, you're already bridging ground for that insecurity to fester.
Sure.
For other people, when a person says you're not good enough, and you're like, oh yeah, well,
actually, I've already said it to myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you two scenarios. What does it look like for someone who's not emotionally safe for themselves, right?
Okay.
A lack of emotional safety for a high performer and for a non-performer. Like, because I think we go two ways. If something, let's say between you and I, something happens and maybe my natural response is to, I'm going to work harder, you know? And because my results of working harder look better, it looks like, oh, she's coping, you know? And maybe for you is flight. You just say, oh, well, go to bed. But both of us are dealing with the trauma just differently. So what does a lack of emotional safety look like for a high performer and someone who takes flight mode?
I think for the high performer, it's what do you do even when you actually perform well? So it's this thing where, you know, when you get your script back in school, like, you'll get like a 95%.
Yeah.
Where does your immediate reaction go? Where did I lose the 5?
Yes, I was going to say that. Where's the 5%?
Where's the 5?
Yeah.
Right? And that's in itself says, I'm not able to even celebrate for a second.
Sure.
The minute I get this thing, I'm not celebrating the fact that I did so well.
Sure.
But I'm actually looking for the mistake in this.
Nitpicking, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So that sense of emotional or lack of emotional safety with yourself when you're a high achiever, it's this constant nitpicking.
Yeah.
It's this constant, I'm not doing as well as I want to. Why did I miss that?
Yeah. Why didn't I do that?
Yeah. You know? And it's just like, it's okay. Sure. Like, you actually got the 95. Have you celebrated that? Have you seen your hard work for that? And whereas for the other person, it's more around their avoidance. So their emotional safety is, I'm not even going to look at that.
Okay.
I'm just going to avoid.
Sure.
I have no issues.
Yeah.
Or let's not even look through that.
Yeah.
It's if I don't test, I don't know. Therefore I don't understand. You know, like that.
Just
that
like what you don't know is
just let it be, like this
Sure.
oblivion is bliss kind of thing, because I don't even know if I can take it. I don't know if I can actually
Yeah.
understand or even deal with that.
And where do we want to find ourselves? Where's the equilibrium for both parties?
I think it would probably be in a space of accepting accountability,
Mm-hmm.
of I didn't perform well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
I didn't perform well, but I also don't need to crucify myself for
Oh,
it.
okay. Accepting accountability. I didn't perform well, but I also don't have to crucify myself.
Yeah. So you don't have a grandiosity of, it doesn't matter, my life, it's not that.
Yeah, it
But
does matter.
but it's also not the shaming yourself. It's not
Yeah.
the bashing yourself. It's not the, I'm not good enough, I'll never be because I failed this one thing.
Sure.
It's literally that middle ground to say, I'll be accountable,
But I won't shame.
but I won't shame myself.
I love that. I found this quote on your page by Deepak Chopra, and I want you to unpack it for me. The less you open your heart to others, the more your heart suffers.
Yeah. I think, oh man, I love that. I love that quote because I think we think when we draw up the walls, we protect ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we draw up the walls, we are actually preventing ourselves from being loved and from loving.
Sure. Now, I listened to a sermon by Lisa, and she was talking about forgiveness, right? And she said it's a command from God to forgive. He commands us to forgive. We have to forgive. However, he does not expect us to reconcile.
Yeah.
So now going back to that wall, the way you put it is that we think that by putting up a wall, we are preventing ourselves, but instead we're not allowing ourselves to feel more love. So how do we now bridge the gap of you hurt me, I forgive you, but who then deserves reconciliation? Because I think we get it, and I know my question is all over, but I think we get it confused that maybe some people deserve forgiveness and grace over there, and some people deserve reconciliation. But then how do we find who deserves the reconciliation and who doesn't?
Yeah. I think in terms of figuring out who should we then reconcile with or not depends on your threshold. So we have these thresholds for relationships. We struggle with friendships and family and all of that.
Yeah.
But we need
For
to
men.
we need to have a threshold to say, what is I can't go beyond this. What is it where I'm like, if you do this to me, I don't know if I can trust to love you again and that you love me.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And I think when you do that, you're giving yourself the space to say, I have a definition of the 3 things, 4 things, 5 things.
Yeah.
I know I actually just can't go beyond because now I can't trust that this relationship will actually grow.
Yeah.
I forgive you, but I just don't know if you have your best intentions for me and for this relationship.
Sure.
And I think if you define that threshold, then it becomes a little bit easier to say, can I walk away from this? And or do we need to try again?